All right, it's a beautiful Wednesday morning. Happy Eid al-Maulud. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast. I am Veronica Dan Ikboye, and this morning I have Kemi Folademo joining me on set. Kemi,
Veronica,
happy public holiday.
Happy Eid al-Maulud. I'll go with the first. Happy public holiday. Okay, it's still a happy public holiday, even though we're here working as usual.
Absolutely. Well, it's the celebration, the holiday rather, is commemorating the birth of the Holy Prophet, and as such, we have to observe a public holiday for those who are Muslim faithful. But then today we have an array of issues that we will be looking at, from the NLC strike to talking points on the papers, especially the aspect of the Zamfara students that were rescued. They were, sharing their ordeal on some of the papers this morning. And then we're also going to look at Edo State governorship election coming up in 2024. But we have some of the aspirants speaking, and then the issues around the election. And so we are also going to look into the matter of diphtheria, how it is that we are already having a burden of about over 700 persons said to have been infected, and over 400 are reportedly said to have died as a result of that. These are some of the issues we'll be looking at this morning. But first, let's begin with organized labor in Nigeria have declared an indefinite strike to press home their demands for a living wage in the aftermath of petrol subsidy removal. The Nigeria Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress say they have begun mobilization of their affiliate unions as they call on well-meaning citizens to wade in. TVC News' Joke Adisa has details.
After weeks of engagement between the leadership of the two leading labor unions and the federal government, the center failed to hold. Both labor centers had met with the government a couple of times, but NLC and TUC consistently urged the government to show more commitment towards alleviating the suffering of the people. To express its dissatisfaction, NLC embarked on a two-day warning strike as it handed government a 21-working-day timeline to meet its demands. All along, TUC expressed hope in government's ability to respond to the demands, which include new minimum wage, support for compressed natural gas initiative, fixing of nation's refineries, and end to importation of fuel, exemption of low-income earners from tax, and resolution of the NURTW and Retian crisis. But in a dramatic twist, both labor centers rose from their separate National Executive Council meetings on Tuesday. Speaking in one voice, they accused the government of insensitivity.
Whereas there is no disagreement between labor and government on the existence of mass suffering, impoverishment, and hunger in the country as a result of the hike in the price of petrol, which demands an urgent need for remedial action. The government has totally abdicated this responsibility and has shown gross unwillingness to act, abandoning Nigerian people and workers to excruciating poverty and affliction.
To direct all workers in Nigeria to withdraw their services from their respective workplaces commencing from the 3rd of October 2023. To direct all affiliates and state councils to immediately start mobilizing accordingly for action to organize street protests and rally until government responds positively to our demands.
The die is cast as Nigerians await federal government's response to the declaration of a total, indefinite, and nationwide strike by organized labor. Joke Adisa, TVC News, Abuja.
Right, indeed, the die is cast as organized labor has set October the 3rd as the day to commence the strike. But government on its part, through the Labour Minister Simon Lalong, has said that Labour should keep engaging government. That, for instance, they have met one of the demands made by the NLC, which was about the release of NURTW members, as the National Union of Road Transport Workers members of executive, which government said they have done that at least. You should use that as a sign to show that government is serious in meeting your demands at the end of the day. But Labour is saying you haven't shown enough commitment. There's still the aspect of working on our refineries. There's still the aspect of CNG buses to alleviate or cushion the effect of the fuel subsidy removal on workers. There's also the matter of fixing wages and all of it. Labour is saying we need to see more. In fact, they are not happy with the manner the palliative was distributed across the country as it is. And Labour is insisting until they see that sense of sincerity and that sense of commitment from government with regards to some of these issues, the demands they have made, the indefinite strike must go on.
Well, this is a matter that we are very familiar with. The Tinubu administration has witnessed so many issues, recorded so many issues with Labour since inception, since the start of its administration. And yet, here we are again, you know, embarking on, well, the date now is fixed for next week. Labour has gone on how many now since the President Tinubu assumed office? There was a 2-day warning strike, as we saw reflected in the report that we just saw. There's been so much, you know, talk and discontent. And, well, in as much as a substantial chunk of Nigerians would say it is inevitable, perhaps Labour needs to go on strike, maybe to show government that it is, you know, indeed serious. It is not happy with what it calls the tardiness of government in addressing the impact of the removal of fuel subsidy. In as much as, you know, this is valid, there is also the other angle that everyone needs to consider, which is the impact of, you know, the strike. Even a day protest, we know how harsh that would be. We were speaking moments ago before the show started about, you know, the fact that a substantial chunk of Nigerians from the informal sector who depend on, you know, having to come out to work, even if they have to sell whatever it is they have to sell, but, you know, and that is what even keeps the economy going. So is there any consideration for these ones? Because from what we see, it appears to be a full-fledged protest until government meets its demands. And, well, on the other hand, government has also said that let us wait till the president gives the usual October the 1st address, where he is bound to make some necessary announcements regarding palliatives and more interventions by the federal government on the masses. So it's still urging for some more patience by Labour. But from what we are seeing with TUC now saying they are involved in this one as against the last time, it does appear to be that Labour is serious, but then we never can tell.
Yes, because anything can happen today. There's still time between now and the 3rd of October when they intend to commence the strike, indefinite strike. October the 1st is a Sunday, and so we will see the president making the statement, the national broadcast as usual. And so I believe Labour will be waiting to hear what the president will say with regards to the action it is ready to take on the 3rd of October. But then again, I believe that Labour needs to engage more with state governments. We have seen some state governors say that they are, you know, putting some measures in place to addressing this matter of cushioning the effect of the removal of fuel subsidy on their citizens. My issue is, how is Labour following up with the state governments? They have state chapters because they are the ones they are mobilizing for the strike. What is the kind of conversations they are having with their state chapters on how they are monitoring the measures that state governments have put in place to addressing these issues? They have made promises. What are we seeing? Are they keeping up with the promises they have made? No, these are some of the issues that I feel that Labour needs to look into as against just calling for a strike? Yes, you are making demands. You have a right to make demands. Yes, you are asking for the increment of wages. Have you looked at the attendant impact on inflation? We already have a figure that we are contending with, over 20%. And we know how things are when we increase wages in this part of the world, that it also affects inflation. Are we also considering that? And what is state governments, like I mentioned, doing? What are other alternatives? How else can we address some of these issues aside going on strike? How far have we come with strikes over the years? What has it done? Yes, it has put pressure on government to take certain steps, but what are the attendant impacts at the end of the day? Has that drawn us a step backward, or 10 steps? Has that taken us forward or drawn us 10 steps backward? These are the critical questions I believe that Labour needs to begin to look into as we speak. There are other areas that Labour can begin to pressure government. How are they engaging with some of their members in terms of perhaps the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, and what can they do? How can they engage these persons? What can they do to support government in this time? Because government alone cannot do it. We have the private sector. How are they engaging with the private sector? The demands you are making, how is that going to impact the lives of those in the private sector? Are we considering that? I am looking at a situation where Labour needs to begin to engage state governments the more. What are they doing for their citizens? They are closest to the people as it is. States that have made promises, what are they doing? How? Because they all have allocation. As we speak, what can you do for your citizens? These are the kinds of engagement I want to see from NLC.
And these are very valid points. The issue of engagement, in as much as Labour is accusing government of not responding to its calls, there's been this back and forth, as we noted earlier. But the issue of engagement, consultations, as well as trust is, these are very critical factors. Government also must be seen, to not have the trust deficit at this point, because when you look at it, these are rather critical issues that, that Labour is speaking about. Of course, the government too is talking, in this regard, but one would expect that we would have genuine consultations, genuine communication strategies between and
transparency.
Yes, and transparency too. All this can never be, overemphasized, that whenever these meetings are held, people need to be sure, people on the outside need to be sure that government means well, that Labour, constructively puts government on its toes and gets them to, reveal more than they may have been, saying before now, because these are critical issues. There is inconvenience, there is hardship, and, government is talking, but government would also need to speak more. And now that lieutenants, ministries have started running, all this while, the attention has more or less shifted to the ministries, especially Labour and productivity. But of course, the buck stops at the table of the president. And you made a fine point about, states. Now, okay, yes, Labour is all over the country, is a national body, and so naturally engagements would start or be prioritized with the federal government. But yes, there is need for state governments. But then the reality on ground is that in some states now, NLC would seem to be rather weak or thereabout, and say, okay, we seem to have a very good relationship with the federal, with the state government. So
how is that relationship
that may also
impacting the lives of the citizens?
And that will also water down the core objectives of Labour, when they are now rubbing shoulders with government, appropriately or inappropriately, depending on where you stand. So there are so many issues that Labour itself would need to address, clean house, as people would call it, before we know that they truly are serious.